So recently I caved in and actually purchased the Elite Dracolich Armor. And today I'm going to be reviewing this armor and telling you guys whether it is worthwhile or not. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight into this video. Now the way I'm going to look at this armor set is in three different perspectives. One of them is a poison build, the second one is going to be a crit focused build, and the third one is going to be in a hybrid application. And I'll go ahead and give you my thoughts on each of them as I tested them. So to give some context about my experience with range as far as a combat style, I enjoy the combat style, it's fun, there's a lot of improv with it. However, I am by no means the world's best range camp, so some of the rotations you might see in clips that I pull as examples are not exactly ideal, or I might not be getting the most ideal kill times, but I have a pretty good basis and understanding on how the combat style works, and have been able to use it relatively effectively at most boss encounters. Well, first off, what is Elite Dracolich Armor? It is essentially a variant of Tier 92 armor that is strong for bows rather than Elite Cerenic being strong for crossbows. Think of this as the arrow armor and Elite Cerenic being the bolt armor. They both have their own unique benefits for both of the ammo types, but they both cannot be switched between because they have a charging effect, so you kind of just pick one and stick with it. Elite Dracolich, though, is a 5-piece armor set, whereas Cerenic is only a 3-piece, which is an interesting design choice, and I'll kind of get into the caveats of the armor set later on. But if you're trying to craft this armor, you start out with Tier 75 Undead Dragonhide. This comes from Vorkath, the Dragonhide that he drops. You can just craft just like any other Dragonhide. You cure it either with going to a tanner, like an Alcarid back in the day, or you can just use the Lunar Spellbook to make Dragonhide or Dragon Leather, whichever one it is. And then you can just craft it into the full 5-piece set of Tier 75. Then you use the Vorkath spikes. You need 99 of them to make a full armor set of the T90 variant. And then once you have the T90 armor set, you can then add 980 ancient scales in total, a bunch of Prisulic essence, I believe it's 12 of them, and you'll need 5 chaotic spikes for the body itself. You will also need some Algrim thread from the dude outside of the Ascension dungeon. And once you have all of those ingredients compiled together, you can then craft the Tier 92 Elite Dracolich armor set. Now the special effect of the Dracolich armor is that while you're wearing it, rapid fire will gain adrenaline per hit, and at the end of it, it will give you a small window to allow a 20% crit buff. With the full armor set, I believe this is 7 seconds. You need at least 3 pieces equipped and satisfying the charging effect in order to take advantage of the rapid fire buff afterwards, and piece 4 and 5 equipped give the additional 1.8, so it's basically 5 or 7 seconds after a full channeled rapid fire in order to get the benefits from the crit buff, which may sound rather nice. However, it is not something that, you know, is game-breakingly powerful or anything like that as far as a set effect, but it is technically best in slot because it does have a set effect that positively affects bow camping, and is why it is best in slot armor. So the first of these 3 situations that you might find yourself using Elite Dracolich armor is with poison builds. And I won't lie, this is probably where I found the most benefit from this armor set. And with a poison build, you're going to be taking advantage of the fact that on every heal you have, when a Blood Reaver is summoned, it will put a hit or 2 out based on those heals. So that counts from Soul Split, that counts from Vamp Aura, eating food, the healing effect that the Reaver has itself, because all of these hits can help spawn additional poison hits. But when you're running a Blood Reaver, you're not getting the 1% passive effect of crit chance when you have a Calg Demon, or the 5% chance from when you press the special attack. Now, this only really is an issue in solo encounters. If you're a group player, there's usually a base or someone in the DPS pile who's probably going to be running a Calg, so 1% damage isn't going to make a whole heck of a lot of difference when trying to get something like Death Spore stacks for a Death Swift rotation, or trying to get out a couple dark bow hits. However, this armor set has really helped fill out the gaps, because when you press rapid fire trying to build up some Death Spore stacks, if you want to go that route, you're pretty much guaranteed to get them, because after the rapid fire ends, say you're only on 3 stacks, you're now on a 20% crit buff, so you can just press Greco, get the remaining stacks. It's pretty much a guaranteed Death Spore effect, so then you can go ahead and get your free Incendiary shot and start your Death Swift, or start DS first, then Incendiary. Now, in the past on poison builds, adrenaline adrenaline management has been quite a concern because death spores were really annoying to get as is, even if you were using Grim. But I believe on an actual poison build, you're supposed to be using Wind Scripture. I think that's the one that's best in slot for poison builds. I honestly can't remember at this point. But as you can see in the background footage, I was mostly testing this at Solak. The three main bosses you're ever going to use a poison build at that I see is Hard Mode Carapax Solo, Solak, and Art Glacor at higher in rages. And at Solak, I use Grim because it is a free cost anyway, so it might be a slight detriment to overall poison damage. But if you're using Grim in conjunction with this armor set, it honestly allows you to pretty much follow some basic crit rotations, where you're getting 3 to 5 dark bow specs out during your death swiftness, which is a lot of damage, especially if you're using it with Bolg procs and lining that up properly. Because if all 3 dark bow hits crit, that's 45k damage, and you're probably going to be under ECB effect trying to keep your HP lower to have your Blood Reaver going, and all of that damage is going to be compounding onto your target. And like I said before, this is kind of the best case scenario, and as you're seeing in the background, that's what I just have, is just some footage from Solak kills. I was doing these on stream, kind of just running through and testing out the armor at a few places. I did notice on release you were able to wear an armor piece, and as long as you wore one armor piece, that satisfied the charging requirement for the entire set effect as far as I'm aware. And I believe that got changed at some point because I was bringing a glove swap, but if you want a glove swap for the extra 2 seconds of crit buff after rapid fire, then you have to put on your gloves 4 full abilities before you press rapid fire, and I don't really think that's worthwhile in a poison build, so I would probably just stick to the Cinder Banes and just leave the gloves in the bank. I brought them along because I thought the method worked, but apparently it's been patched. But overall, at Solak specifically, I was very impressed. I think my fastest poison method kill beforehand was somewhere in the 650s or the 640s, and then during this little hour stint, as I was figuring things out again, as I had not done this method here at Solak for a while, I typically run some type of weird hybrid setup or just Magic Camp Solak to keep it simple. But when I was here, I think I had a PB of like a 622 or a 618 or something like. I had a pretty low 6 minute, and that was just unoptimized, and I tried doing a storm skip because you have Blood Reaver going, and I think if you really optimize the poison build, sub 6s are definitely in the cards. Because you have Blood Reaver healing you, you can pretty much soul split and let Vamp Aura do some of the additional healing, because as far as I'm aware, Vamp Aura will still heal you even if you have ECB active, because it's not technically a soul split healing source, so you're gaining health from that plus your Blood Reaver on whatever auto cast you want to set it on. So you could pretty much just ECB spec and camp soul split as much as you want, and like I said before, all that damage is going to compound on top of each other. But I think I've rambled on enough about poison method. Overall, if you're a poison method enthusiast and you're thinking about buying this armor, this is probably the best case scenario where you actually get a tangible buff or a tangible increase in usability for your rotations. But let's go ahead and move it on to crit builds. Now, as far as testing out a full-on crit build, I obviously ditched the Bic arrows. I was just running full arrows. I put the Calg Demon back on and just fully sent it with the full armor set. And I went ahead and picked Raksha for this because I've done a decent amount of range Raksha. I know roughly what to expect. And I will say I was pleasantly surprised by the armor set here, but it was nothing really extreme, so to speak. In a crit build, it felt like it was just bringing some nice consistency, but it was not increasing your overall maximum damage. So you might see an increase in your average kill time here, but you're not going to see, you know, like a groundbreaking new personal best if you've done quite a lot of range with Bolg and just running Serenic armor. But anyways, what I found the armor set was doing here, like I said before, was just bringing a lot of consistency to the number of dark bows you're able to pump out during a Death Swift rotation. That is the main thing I noticed, and it was also nice to pump out a rapid fire outside of DS to try and get some extra crits on maybe a lucky SGB or something like that in order to try and phase it on phase 3. Now you'll see in the background footage that I wasn't doing any crazy setups or anything like that. I was grabbing some Death Spore stacks on a dummy in Wars, but that was literally the extent of it. And if you wanted to with this armor set, I could see it being consistent enough to where you take a page out of the Magic playbook before FSOA got nerfed, and you would set up on a dummy with a natty, start your sun, get an FSOA built up, and then you would then go ahead and use your second Sunshine to get through phase 3 and kind of do a pool skip that way. I believe back then the average kill time was a 2:05 because people just didn't want to deal with pools and they'd rather spend a little bit of extra time on getting the boss down. I think some people are even getting in the 150s, but the main point here is that you could probably take a similar idea for doing Raksha if you don't want to sit there and deal with pools. You could go ahead and bring a dummy, build up a Natty Instinct, and get your Death Swift built up, your Incend and everything, and then just go ahead and try and delete phase 1 as fast as possible, and then just kind of hang out at the end of phase 2 until you can DS again, to then go ahead and go for a pool skip. Or you could probably figure out a method that is good enough to just allow Death Swift to consistently get you into a pool skip. I honestly did not play with this one too much. I think I did 20 or 30 minutes of Raksha. I was averaging around a 220 to 230, which is a little bit faster than my normal range kills, but not by a whole lot. I'd say my average kill time using range in Serenic, just straight up range camping, was around the 230 mark, although I had some as fast as the 220s. And when using this new armor set, I was getting more into the 220s, but I wasn't noticing any type of extreme speed buff. Again, it's just more of uplifting your average rather than your max potential. The best way to think about this damage increase is if you take a bell curve and just kind of narrow it, but keep the right side of it a constant point. So you have a thinner bell curve, your minimum comes up a little bit, your average is a little bit better, but your maximum potential is still exactly the same. I mean, technically it can be a little bit higher because we're now gaining an extra range damage bonus from our gloves and our boots, but those damage bonuses really don't matter too much. So with a bit of work at Raksha, I could see you building up some consistency here and even trying to build up a consistent pool skip rotation. That might be something I play with a little bit further on, but overall all I really saw was adding a little bit of extra consistency to some of those big Death Swift rotations I used to get, but nothing out of the ordinary. Now the last place I tested this armor set was in a hybrid scenario, and one of my more favorite places to use range in a hybrid setup is at Glacor with magic as the other combat style. Now if you go for a very simple hybrid rotation where you're just taking advantage of the ultimate cooldown and not trying to focus on doing off-style crit buffs to always have some form of crit adrenaline gain, i.e. you're just keeping Tsunami inside your Sunshine and you're just using Death Spores to get an Incendiary for your DS, but you're not waiting for those 20 seconds to wait for your ultimate to come back. You're just going into another ultimate. That is kind of my favorite way to do Glacor. It's pretty simple and straightforward because as long as you understand a Death Swift rotation and you understand a Sunshine rotation, you kind of just flop back and forth based on what the boss gives you. In this scenario is where I noticed the least amount of potential gain as far as damage is concerned. The average gain is still going to be there because, like the crit build, I'm not counting on poison or anything like that, and I wasn't going anywhere near the enrages where I would need a poison build. So as far as the hybrid setup is concerned, you know, you're only using range half the time technically, so you're not going to notice any of the real benefits as much as compared to straight style camping. You know, that's just kind of basic math on that, but it is bringing consistency to your rotation, so it's a little bit more reliable, a little bit more repeatable, and a bit higher damage. The most obnoxious thing I found in the hybrid setup though was the charging effect that the armor set has. On release, I believe you were able to use the magic combat style with just the gloves on from the range set, and that would satisfy the base requirements for charging, thus allowing you to hybrid swap. However, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, and you do have to wait for the charging effect. Now, it's not too big of a deal because by the time you would rapid fire in your DS anyway on a kind of more basic hybrid rotation, it wasn't really too much of an issue. The charging had built up and it kind of was just a plug and play setup. However, if you're starting to go for something more advanced, like you're really starting to do some off-style crit buff, you're probably going to be wanting to press rapid fire a bit earlier in your rotation, and you're not going to really get the benefits because charging might not be up by then. Now, I understand this affects a very small portion of the population, but there's quite a few high-level PVMers in the comments here who watch my videos and guides, or even just aspiring high-level PVMers who just want to get into the high-end stuff. But anyways, these are the 3 scenarios I went ahead and tested this armor set in. Now I'm going to kind of go into the pros and cons and if this item set is worth it or not. So what are my honest overall thoughts about this armor set? Is it worth it? Should you buy it, and I'll give you a few different scenarios and allow you to make the decision for yourself. So if you're someone who is doing a lot of poison build methods and you're really enjoying your Glacore, your Carapac, your Solax solos, you're kind of just running poison all the time, this is a tangible upgrade that will make your life a bit nicer. And if you're a poison build enthusiast who is only range camping, you have dedicated your entire RuneScape account to the ranged combat style, then yes, this is an upgrade you probably should get, although I would get it later on, as it is quite expensive. That is the elephant in the room with this armor set. I paid 1.9 billion GP for this armor set, so rounding up, it's basically 2 bill to go from the undead all the way to the tier 92, and that is a tough cost to swallow. Not only to mention the fact that range is also still the most expensive combat style as far as best in slot is concerned, without even going in to purchase the armor set, because you have your SGB, your ECB, EOF, you have the Bow of the Last Guardian, other things like Grim or other pocket slots, the quivers that you're gonna need, arrow cost, other things of the sort. Then go ahead and factor that in, but range, I believe, is still the most expensive combat style to get best in slot, regardless of this armor set. So adding another 2 bill cost to a combat style that's still probably going to get outperformed by necromancy, and the item set cost the same as all of the best in slot gear for necromancy, it's kind of hard to justify. So it's going to be something for people who just have the infinite GP and are just willing to buy best in slot regardless of its cost. And as far as anyone wanting to add this to their hybrid setup or their crit build, say you want to do a lot of Raksha or you want to go to Zami, it is an upgrade. And if you're a Zami farmer specifically and you're really pushing higher in rages, you probably have the spare GP stockpiles lying around for a 2 bill armor set. So in that case, go ahead and buy it. It is an upgrade, it is nice, but overall I cannot justify the cost of this armor set in its current state. And that's going to lead me into some of the oddities I've noticed with this armor set, being that the entire special effect of this armor set, what it is entirely based off of, is a fully channeled rapid fire, yet we cannot include our fleeting boots to get the full effects. It's kind of a catch-22, where if you want the full effects from the armor set, you have to wear all 5 pieces, but now you can't use the mobility that fleeting boots allowed you or the extra accuracy that they gave you. Now, the accuracy on fleeting boots is kind of a moot point. It was nice for getting Blackstone arrows off at a couple places because you had the better accuracy to get the initial arrows to start hitting. So it's just kind of an odd design choice overall, where they went with a 5-piece armor set that is required for maximum benefits, which is, in my honest opinion, the bare minimum for it being really worthwhile. I think having 7 seconds of a 20% crit buff after activating a fully channeled rapid fire, which at most you're going to be using 2 times in a Death Swift rotation, I think that is a pretty tall ask. Most of the time in most DS rotations, I was not using rapid fire. I was using it once, if that, as kind of a filler ability to help get some ECB spam out. But most of the time I would just skip it in favor of some dark bow spam in order to go for the higher potential Death Swift rotations. Being that it's probably better damage, instead of hitting a bunch of 2.5Ks on a target, that it's better to hit a triple 45K potential and kind of match that with a piercing or a snapshot. Also, we're not going to be able to use Nightmare or the Nightmare enchantment that we all have bought if we want to get the full benefit out of the armor set, because you need all 5 pieces. Now, Nightmares are kind of a lesser effect because it only affects the ability Snipe, but it does give you mobility on it, and Snipe is a very strong ability. It is a basic I constantly find myself not using enough, but it is definitely worthwhile in most rotations. And it's just kind of odd that they would release a tier 92 armor set that has full 5 slots for its set effect, and kind of just negating everything else before it that's now in its place, basically. But it's just kind of odd that they put a tier 92 armor set in game that was a full 5-piece outfit and didn't allocate anything for upgrading fleeting boots or anything like that, or allow those items to work with the armor set in some type of way, or convert them to enchantments. There's a lot of things they can still do with those items. Now, some of you might be screaming at your monitor right now saying that yes, you can still get the crit buff effect from this armor set and still wear the Nightmares with the rapid fires, Car Guy. You only need 3 pieces for the effect. But the drawback of that is when you're wearing the armor set for only 3 pieces, it's 3.6 seconds of crit buff. That's essentially no time. That's 2 global cooldowns. Whereas when you have the full set, at least you're getting 4 global cooldowns, so you at least feel like you're getting some type of benefit. And it's also weird that we have a second tier 92 armor set coming into game rather than just going for T95. I also thought that was an extremely odd design choice. As far as just bringing the armor set in game, like this could have been a tier 95 set and I would have been more okay with, you know, leaving say tier 90 boots or gloves that have been upgraded kind of in the past, because hey, it's a new best in slot armor set at T95 with some like really nice effect and it's worth the trade-off. Whereas right now I don't see the mobility trade-off of fleeting boots and nightmares in the situation where you would be wearing the full 5-piece super worthwhile for 2 extra global cooldowns of a 20% crit buff. It is strong, don't get me wrong, it brings consistency to rotations. I'm just questioning the design choices made initially for this armor set. Now luckily RuneScape gets pretty much updated every week or month, so this is something that we could easily see updated in the future. Overall, I think it is a decent performing armor set. I just think it was kind of unnecessary to add into the game, but the design choices and possibilities of what they could have added into game could turn into an hour-long discussion in of itself, and I have been ranting on for quite a bit. Alrighty, that's my overall thoughts on this armor set. It is just kind of more of a first impressions type of thing. There are probably going to be updates to it and other changes and tweaks. Who knows how it's going to be affected when the combat beta gets changed for another 10 times and then eventually imported into the game. But we will just have to wait and see what the future holds. Overall, I'll just reiterate it one more time. I think 1.9 bill is a gross overpay for this item set, and it's only for those who are in a position to be able to just toss 2 bill down the drain for some gear and not really think twice, rather than some giant necessity that you need to go out and purchase when you haven't even gotten all of the EOFs yet or any of the other best in slot gear, and even just trying to purchase the T90 gear and then upgrade it eventually. That's still an expensive ask, because at time of recording, I think Vorkath spikes are still around 7 mil each, and then 99 of those, so you're looking at just around 700 mil for the tier 90 armor set, when Serenic I still think is really cheap, like sub 100 mil. However, these are just my opinions. It is your GP and your way of playing the game. You guys can do exactly whatever the heck you want. Leave it down in the comments below if you agree or disagree, or if you have any experiences to share with the armor set, feel free to leave that in the comments below. But before I keep rambling on these unhinged rants, I will go ahead and close out the video. Thank you all for watching. Your viewership is greatly appreciated. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, nighttime, whatever it is, or wherever you are, and I will see you next time for the next video. Peace.